Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today I'm so excited to announce that we're finally kicking off our second Let's Talk Lore series on the channel. I know it's been almost 2 weeks since the 8 Princes series wrapped, and for many of you it's been a long wait. But in my defense, when I first made the 8 Princes series, I was totally caught off guard by the huge reception. At the time, this channel had maybe just 200 subscribers, and I simply wanted to try something new that combined my interest in the game Total War 3 Kingdoms and my love of history. So with the release of the 8 Princes DLC, I saw the perfect opportunity to share a piece of Chinese history while helping English-speaking players learn about the characters and stories from that time period to help enrich everyone's gaming experience. Fortunately, you guys loved the content, and now this channel has more than doubled to almost 500 subscribers, and I'm so thankful for each and every one of you. However, it has also left me a bit unprepared, as I was not sure what lore to do next. So for the last 2 weeks, I have carefully curated and picked out what I think is the best 3 Kingdom stories to continue our lore series. It was a bit of a mad scramble, but in the end, I decided on the story of when Guan Yu joined Cao Cao. This is probably not the first story that comes to mind when you think of the 3 Kingdoms period, but trust me, this story is exciting, intriguing, and action-packed. And other than being a great standalone story, this lore series will help set us up for my 3rd, 4th, and 5th lore series on the channel. Yes, you heard me right. The plans for the next 4 lore series have already been made, and they will all be released in rapid succession to spare you guys the wait. So, for a little tease about what is coming up after this series, I present to you guys Let's Talk Lore 赤壁, the battle that formed the 3 Kingdoms. This epic saga will be told in 3 separate series that spans from Zhuge Liang joining Liu Bei to the death of Zhou Yu. Each of these series will contain 10 episodes each, and I cannot wait to share this epic saga with all of you guys. However, before we can get there, we have to first tell the tale of the time when Guan Yu joined Cao Cao. Now, before we dive into this story, there are a few disclosures I need to get out of the way. Unlike the 8 Princes lore series, where the material is based entirely on actual history, our 3 Kingdom lore series going forward will be based almost entirely on the novel The Romance of the 3 Kingdoms by Luo Guanzhong, or 三国演义, as it is known in Chinese. As the title suggests, Luo Guanzhong's book is a romanticized work in historical fiction, so it is not entirely historically accurate. And that is okay, because historical records from 191 is scarce, so Luo Guanzhong's mix of actual history and popular folklore creates a much more exciting version of history, just like how the romance mode in the game Total War 3 Kingdoms allows your heroes to become larger than life. There is a reason why this book is listed as one of the 4 greatest literary works in Chinese history and was my favorite book to read growing up. And since our series is called Let's Talk Lore and not Let's Talk History, I feel completely comfortable to base our series on this novel. Now, for fans of history, there will be a bonus episode at the end of the series where I will go over some of the more interesting historical deviations that are in the novel. So for our historical fans out there and record mode players, there is something to look forward to as well. Alright, with that said, let's take a look at the upcoming programming for this series. Our story will have a total of 5 episodes, plus a bonus historical episode at the end for a total of 6 episodes, with new episodes uploaded every other day at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, I think that's all the announcements, so let's get started. Our story takes place in the early month of the year 200. At the time, Cao Cao is riding high off a string of recent victories. In 196, Cao Cao was able to take the young emperor hostage following the death of Dong Zhuo, and named himself as regent and prime minister of the Han. In 197, Yuan Shu foolishly declared himself as emperor of his newly founded kingdom of Zhong, and was soundly defeated as a false emperor by a coalition led by Cao Cao. And in 199, after a series of difficult battles against the warlord and legendary general Liu Bei, Cao Cao was able to defeat, capture, and execute Liu Bei at Baimenlou. So with Cao Cao's power level now rising over 9,000, the only warlord who can match him in power is Yuan Shao. And if we just quickly look at this map, we can see that in the year 200, Cao Cao is the salmon color faction on the map, occupying most of the central plains between the Yellow and Yangtze River, while Yuan Shao is the yellow color faction occupying the north. Given their proximity to each other, both sides are beginning to realize that war between the two factions is unavoidable, and hostility has been mounting between the two factions as they prepared for war. But before we drift off into the Battle of Guan Yu, we have to remember that this series is about Guan Yu. So where is Guan Yu at the beginning of the year 200? At this time, Guan Yu, being the loyal sworn brother to Liu Bei and Zhang Fei, is serving diligently under Liu Bei as they continue their effort to restore the Han. But if we take another look at the map here, we don't see Liu Bei's name on the map, and that is because Liu Bei's forces are so small and insignificant that you can only find them here, as a little dot in Xuzhou, surrounded on all sides by Cao Cao. And until recently, Liu Bei enjoyed a good relationship with Cao Cao, as Liu Bei aided Cao Cao in both the war against Yuan Shu and Lü Bu. However, with hostilities mounting between Yuan Shao and Cao Cao, Liu Bei has decided to side with Yuan Shao, as Cao Cao has been branded as the manipulative, self-appointed usurper prime minister who is a threat to the Han Empire that Liu Bei has tried to restore. So, in the year 199, Liu Bei, who was basically a vassal under Cao Cao, killed the administrator of Xuzhou and declared his independence from Cao Cao. Cao Cao responded by ordering Liu Dai to lead an army of 50,000 men to attack Liu Bei. But Liu Dai's forces were soundly defeated by a 6,000-man army led by Guan Yu and Zhang Fei. This defeat was especially embarrassing, as Liu Dai was captured alive and released to go back to the capital by himself. His army of 50,000 scattered to the wild, with many of them being recruited into Liu Bei's forces. When Liu Dai returned to the capital, Cao Cao was furious and ordered for Liu Dai's execution. But Kong Rong pleaded that Liu Dai clearly was never a match for Liu Bei, so executing him for this predictable defeat would only serve to hurt the troops' morale. Cao Cao grudgingly agreed to spare Liu Dai's life, but for his failures, Liu Dai was stripped of all his titles and banished from the court. Now, many of you might be confused by why Kong Rong is here pleading for Liu Dai's life under Cao Cao's court. This is because, unlike in the game, the Han Empire is still a fully functioning empire at the time, and as the governor of Beihai, Kong Rong was a Han Empire official, so he was expected to be at court to make decisions for the government. We have to understand that when Cao Cao took the child emperor hostage, he did not end the Han Empire. He simply made himself the regent prime minister and ruled using the emperor's name. So if you are a governor like Ma Teng, Liu Biao, or Kong Rong, you had to obey Cao Cao's orders, as they represented the orders of the emperor. If you disobeyed, then you are the rebel. So it makes perfect sense for Kong Rong to be present here and pleading for Liu Dai's life. However, for Cao Cao, Liu Bei still remains a thorn in his side. So this time, Cao Cao is going to personally lead an army to wipe Liu Bei off the map once and for all. So with 200,000 men and a lineup of generals that includes Xiahou Dun, Xun Yu, Xiahou Yuan, Xu Huang, Xu Chu, Zhang Liao, Yu Jin, Cao Ren, Li Dian, Guo Jia, and many more, Cao Cao marches towards Xuzhou. When the news of Cao Cao's advance reached Liu Bei, plans were quickly made to defend Xuzhou. Aside from the regional city of Xuzhou, Liu Bei's forces had control of two surrounding small cities. To the west of Xuzhou and closest to Cao Cao's advance is the small city of Xiaopei, and to the east of Xuzhou is the small city of Xiapi. First, Liu Bei and Zhang Fei garrisoned in Xiaopei to serve as the vanguard unit to face off against Cao Cao. Jian Yong and Mi Zhu were tasked with defending the stronghold of Xuzhou. Meanwhile, Guan Yu guarded Xiapi, where Liu Bei's two wives, Lady Gan and Lady Mi, also resided. As a little side note, Lady Gan was a local girl from Xiaopei, and Lady Mi is Mi Zhu's little sister. Now, knowing that his army of less than 50,000 men, are no match against Cao Cao's army of over 200,000 men, Liu Bei immediately sent a messenger to Yuan Shao to seek aid. However, when the messenger arrived at Yuan Shao's camp, what he sees is a disheveled Yuan Shao, weeping at the bedside of an infant boy. It turns out Yuan Shao's fifth son, who also happens to be his favorite son, is gravely ill, and Yuan Shao is clearly in no mood for a campaign against Cao Cao. Despite pleas from Yuan Shao's strategist Tian Feng that this is now the perfect opportunity to launch an assault against Cao Cao's now thinly defended capital of Xuchang to free the emperor from Cao Cao's grasp, Yuan Shao simply did not listen. Learning that help was not coming, Liu Bei and Zhang Fei decided that their best chance was to make a surprise offensive night raid against Cao Cao's newly arrived forces, who must be tired from their long march to Xuzhou. Now is where the romance of the Three Kingdoms gets a little mystical. The book states that as Cao Cao's forces made camp upon arriving at the outskirts of Xiaopei, a sudden gust of wind snapped a flag post. Seeing this, Xun Yu commented that this was a sign that they were going to get raided tonight, so a trap was laid. That night, Liu Bei and Zhang Fei snuck their forces out of Xiaopei and towards Cao Cao's encampment. Once they arrived at the encampment, Zhang Fei led the charge with his light cavalry into the camp, only to find a lightly defended camp with barely any men inside. Then all of a sudden, fire lit up the night skies as enemies rushed in from every direction. You had Zhang Liao from the east, Xu Chu from the west, Yu Jin from the south, and Li Dian from the north. And from the southeast came Xu Huang. Southwest had Yue Jin, northeast had Xiahou Dun, and northwest had Xiahou Yuan. As Cao Cao's men poured into the encampment, many of Zhang Fei's men laid down their arms as they had originally served Cao Cao as part of Liu Dai's ill-fated campaign. With only a few riders still loyal to him, Zhang Fei fought off Xu Huang and Yue Jin and broke out of the ambush. But with Cao Cao's troop controlling all the main roads leading towards Xuzhou and Xiapi, Zhang Fei was forced to flee toward Mangdang Mountain. Meanwhile, Liu Bei's forces were just about to enter the encampment when Zhang Fei triggered the trap. Before they could react, Xiahou Dun's forces cut off their retreat. Not long after, Xiahou Yuan arrived, and Liu Bei, alongside 30 bodyguards, fought their way out of the ambush and headed towards north. At a clearing, they could see the small city of Xiaopei on fire, as Cao Cao's main forces had started their siege on the small city. With the main roads back towards Xuzhou and Xiapi controlled by Cao Cao, Liu Bei decides to continue to ride north towards his ally Yuan Shao. But as his small group turned north, they were met by Li Dian's forces, and Liu Bei's bodyguard fought valiantly as they sacrificed their lives to cut open a path for Liu Bei to escape north by himself. Riding non-stop, Liu Bei reaches Qingzhou, where he was greeted by Yuan Shao's eldest son and the administrator of Qingzhou, Yuan Tan. Hearing his misfortunes against Cao Cao, Yuan Tan offers Liu Bei an armed escort and sends Liu Bei on his way farther north to Yuan Shao's base in the ancient capital city of Ye. At this point, Liu Bei is officially homeless again and essentially becomes a vassal of Yuan Shao. Meanwhile, back in Xuzhou, Cao Cao's forces easily took control of Xiaopei and pushed onto Xuzhou the same night. With both Liu Bei and Zhang Fei missing, Jian Yong and Mi Zhu abandoned the now hopeless Xuzhou and fled. So as Cao Cao's forces settled into Xuzhou, Cao Cao meets with his generals to discuss their next step as Guan Yu still holds Xiapi. Cao Cao's top strategist, Xun Yu, steps forth and states that they must act swiftly against Guan Yu, as Yuan Shao still looms large in the north. Cao Cao agrees, but shares his admiration for Guan Yu's prowess on the battlefield as he asks if anyone's willing to go as a mediator to meet and convince Guan Yu to surrender. Another strategist, Guo Jia, cuts in and says that Guan Yu is well known for his unwavering loyalty to Liu Bei, and that any mediator will likely get killed instead, as Guan Yu will defend Xiapi and Liu Bei's family to the death. Yet, Despite Guo Jia's warning, Zhang Liao stepped forth and says, I'm willing to go. Now, Zhang Liao is also a surrendered general who had previously worked for Liu Bu. When he was captured alongside Liu Bu at Baimenlou, it was Guan Yu who vouched for his character and spared him from the executioner. As Zhang Liao prepares to leave, a third strategist, Chen Yu, steps forth and says, although Zhang Liao and Guan Yu shares a bond, it would be difficult to convince Guan Yu to surrender while he holds the city. If we gather up some of Liu Bei's troops who have surrendered and have them retreat to Xiapi, Guan Yu would unknowingly welcome them into the city. Then we can challenge Guan Yu to a fight and lure him out of the city. Once Guan Yu leaves, our men inside can open the gate and turn the city over to us. With Xiapi and Liu Bei's wife in our hand, it would be a lot easier to convince Guan Yu to surrender. Delighted by Chen Yu's plan, Cao Cao sends off a group of surrendered troops that night towards Xiapi, and they were welcomed in by Guan Yu without raising suspicion. The very next morning, Xiahou leads a small force of 5,000 men to Xiapi. At first, Guan Yu refuses to leave the city, but Xiahou remained outside the gates of Xiapi and taunted Guan Yu about his sworn brothers dying the night before. Enraged, Guan Yu gathers up 3,000 men and rides out to silence Xiahou. The two generals duel for a while, and Xiahou feigns defeat and rides away on his horse. Eager to take advantage of the fleeing enemy, Guan Yu gives chase. As Guan Yu gets closer each time, Xiahou will resume the duel, only to run away again after a few rounds of fighting. It wasn't long before Guan Yu realized he was being drawn away from Xiapi, but just as he halted his chase, two forces appeared behind him to cut off his retreat to Xiapi. At the head of the force on the left was Xu Huang, and the general leading the force on the right was none other than Xu Chu. As Guan Yu tried to break through, he was met with hundreds of crossbowmen whose bolts covered the sky like a swarm of locusts. Unable to get through, Guan Yu was forced to fight off both Xu Huang and Xu Chu before attempting to take another route back to Xiapi, only to be met once again by Xiahou forces. The chaotic fighting lasted till dusk as Guan Yu and his small group of remaining men rested on the top of a hill surrounded by Cao Cao's men. Overlooking the hilltop, Guan Yu can see the fire raging inside the city of Xiapi as Cao Cao's main force has already taken the city once Guan Yu left. Distressed by the uncertain fate of Liu Bei's wives, Guan Yu made several attempts to fight through the blockade of Cao Cao's men at the foot of the hill, only to be beaten back each time by a hail of arrows. By sunrise the next morning, as Guan Yu and his men made final preparations for a final charge down the hill, a lone rider approached their position. As the rider got closer, Guan Yu could make out the familiar face of Zhang Liao. Riding out to meet him, Guan Yu asked, Zhang Liao, have you come to fight? Zhang Liao responds, no, I have only come to return a favor to a good friend, as he throws down his weapons and rides into camp. In camp, Guan Yu asks again, then I guess you have come to persuade me to surrender then. Zhang Liao shakes his head and again responds, no, you had once saved my life, so now I have come to save yours. Guan Yu then asks, then are you here to help me fight? Zhang Liao again answers, no. Frustrated, Guan Yu asks, if you're not here to help me, then why have you come at all? Zhang Liao replies, as you can see, Cao Cao's force has already taken Xiapi, and I have come just to let you know that Liu Bei's family is unharmed and safe. Now furious, Guan Yu replies, what is the meaning of telling me this while I'm at my most desperate hour? Leave me and prepare to face my final charge. Zhang Liao responds by laughing out loud and says, if you ride to your certain death, the world will laugh at you as I laugh at you now. Confused by Zhang Liao's response, Guan Yu asks, why would the world laugh at me when I served honorably till my last breath? Zhang Liao responds, if you ride to your death now, you will commit 3 crimes. First, Liu Bei and you share the oath of the peach gardens. If he turns out to be alive and needs your help in the future, and you're already dead, then you have abandoned your oath. Second, Liu Bei has entrusted his family to you, but if you are dead, then you have abandoned your duty. And third, With your skills, you should be serving to protect the Han. But if you are dead, then you have abandoned your country. With these 3 crimes, why wouldn't the people laugh at your suicidal charge? Taking a deep sigh, Guan Yu asked, if I will commit these 3 crimes with my death, then what would you have me do instead? Zhang Liao responds, surrender to Cao Cao. As long as you are alive, you can seek out news of Liu Bei, and a reunion is possible. As long as you are alive, you can ensure the safety of Liu Bei's wives. And most importantly, as long as you are alive, you can still be useful to the country. Guan Yu paused to think for a moment before responding. I will only surrender if Cao Cao can agree to 3 conditions. 1. I will be surrendering to the Han, and not to Cao Cao. 2. Liu Bei's wives must be treated with respect. And 3. If the whereabouts of Liu Bei becomes known, I must be allowed to leave. If Cao Cao can agree to all 3 conditions, then I will surrender. Or else, I will carry the burden of the 3 crimes and write to meet my death today. So Zhang Liao leaves camp and rides back to inform Cao Cao. When Cao Cao hears the first request, Cao Cao laughs and says, I'm the prime minister of the Han. Surrendering to the Han is the same as surrendering to me. This is not a problem. When Cao Cao hears the second request, Cao Cao laughs once again and says, of course Liu Bei's wives will be treated with respect. This is not a problem. But when Cao Cao hears the third request, Cao Cao shakes his head and says, what is the point of employing Guan Yu if he will just leave whenever Liu Bei reappears? This is a problem. Unwilling to see his friend die, Zhang Liao explains, Guan Yu has faced nothing but hardship since joining Liu Bei. If he joins us and sees how well my lord treats all of us and all the luxuries we enjoy, how can he not be touched and persuaded to stay? And with Liu Bei missing in action from the fighting last night, there is a good chance he is already dead. So we must not let this small detail prevent such a fine addition to our ranks. Eager to employ Guan Yu, Cao Cao agrees. And that is how we have the time that Guan Yu joins Cao Cao. To find out more about Guan Yu's exploit while serving under Cao Cao and his journey back to Liu Bei, come back next episode where we will discuss how Guan Yu almost got Liu Bei killed while helping Cao Cao defeat Yuan Shao. And this concludes episode 1 of our new Let's Talk Lore series. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you haven't done so already, please consider showing your support for the channel by subscribing. And once again, thank you all for watching and see you next time. Bye!